My name is Brant Choate, and I'm the director of the Division of Rehabilitative Programs for California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And basically, I oversee all of the rehabilitative programs. That would be education and treatment programs in the prison as well as in the community. And I'm joined today with four incredible men that I met a couple weeks ago in a meeting, and thought that the message that they share with me really needs to be shared with you, those that are inside, living inside of our institutions. And I really hope that through the conversation today, that you can learn from them and they can help provide some hope for you and some instruction on how to better take advantage of the opportunity you have there, as well as prepare for reentry. So these men are from an organization called CROP, and throughout the conversation, I'll have them explain, what CROP is, what they do. But what I want to do is just take turns going around the room here and have them introduce themselves, and then answer a question, which is, in your opinion, what is are the most important things that people could do right now, regardless of their status in prison, right now, to start preparing for not only a better prison experience, but for reentry, and something that you've all four successfully done. So let's go ahead and start. Richard, you want to start off?
Yes, my name is Richard Morales. I'm the Director of Communications for the CROP organization. I also host our podcast called The Prison Post. And I've been out now for a little over 18 months after serving a 25 years to life sentence. I was incarcerated from 1998 until 2019. I spent the last 18 years and 2 months in Soledad State Prison, CTF Facility C, and lived there longer than I lived anywhere else my whole life. Since being out, I was blessed with the opportunity to be employed by the CROP organization, and worked hard waiting for my brothers to join me. We were a team inside of Soledad. We built programs, including an alcohol and drug counseling certification program inside of Soledad. And we worked together, and we had a dream and a goal, a vision to come out here and do our work. I would say that my message to the guys in there, based on what I know now and what I thought then before paroling, is a lot different than what I believe now. I was one of the guys who had the porter job or the clerk job or the gym job because I thought it afforded me more time to go to the yard, to make my phone calls, to do my college work, to read books, to do those things that I wanted to do. Now being out here, even with an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree and close to a master's degree and a full-time job, seeing my brothers and sisters who have left prison and who are coming out here into various jobs, seeing guys that I know are very smart, very talented, struggling to get good paying jobs that where they can make a viable income. The guys, and I can't speak for the ladies, but the men that I knew were very smart, having the clerk jobs and the porter jobs and the yard crew jobs. They're coming out here to work in minimum wage jobs or just a few dollars above minimum wage with moving companies and construction work. So my encouragement is to get a solid vocation, to get out of those porter jobs and clerk jobs. I mean, those are great, and those are for somebody, and they are awesome that we're able to serve. But if you're getting close to getting home, you need to get some type of vocation, whether it be welding. And I'm not talking about lawnmower repair. There's guys that have been doing lawnmower repair for 40 years out here. I'm talking about the welding job, the plumbing jobs, where you can come out here making $30 to $50 an hour and support a family and be a responsible citizen and start the process of owning a home and buying your vehicle. So that would be my take on that.
Thank you. Jason?
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Jason Bryant. I am the Director of Restorative Programs for the CROP organization. I served a little over 20 years in prison. I started off on level 4 high desert and worked my way down to level 2 Soledad. And I was at Soledad with Richard. He talked about some of our work and our accomplishments there. So for me, when I was arrested, I was 20 years old, and I was actually apprehended at my parents' home. And prior to that, I had lived I definitely lived a irresponsible, reckless life. Just kind of thought I could do whatever I wanted and that I'd get away with it. And it didn't really matter if I got caught, because ultimately, it was my life and I could do what I wanted with it. But on the day I was arrested, at my parents' house, I saw something that I had never really seen before, which was my father in tears. My dad was the kind of guy who worked from dark to dark, and he never made many complaints about life. He had broken bones riding horses or different work accidents, and I never really saw him shed a tear. But when I was apprehended, as the sheriffs were ushering me down the driveway, there was my dad at the end of the driveway, and he's just, uncontrollable sobs, heaving sobs of sorrow and sadness and just, despair for his son's choice that was going to result in him being taken away for a long time. So, at that moment in my life, I kind of understood something. It wasn't really developed, but I got that my decisions impacted the people who I loved most. So when I got to the level 4 yard, the one thing I knew was that I didn't want to continue revisiting that pain on my parents, on my loved ones. So I did my best to stay out of the way, to stay away from the politics on the yard, and just keep my head down. And the way I found to be most useful was education. So, back in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of support in getting an education. But fortunately, my family continued to love and support me, and they helped me to finance my ability to go to school through correspondence. And my advice to the men and women inside who are wondering how to make their days useful is this. And I'll kind of couch it in another story. My dad, he died in 2002. But before he died, we had a visit, and he was telling me about how he was going to stick around until I got out. Now, my dad he was 45 when he had me, so he was in his 60s when we were having this conversation. And he's like, son, I'm going to hang around until you get out, and we're going to open a business together. And I was kind of throwing a pity party for myself, where no one was really showing up. And I was like, well, Dad, but it's so long away. I think I got 24 years until they're even going to think about letting me out. And my dad told me, he said, I don't care if it's 24 years, 24 months, 24 days. All you got is this moment, son. You got to make the most of this moment. You got to make the most of this day. And I wasn't always successful at that. There were days where I was lazy, but for the most part, when I was at my best, I found something productive to do every day, something productive to do, something positive, whether it was read a book, whether it was enroll in school, enroll in class, participate in a group, find something positive and productive to do. And over the course of time, continuing with that mantra of doing something positive and something constructive every day, I eventually earned, a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees while incarcerated. And as a result of a lot of hard work with my education and the programming that Richard spoke about, the governor of California commuted my sentence on March 27th of this year and ordered my immediate release from prison.
That's right.
So my hope for you is that you find something positive and constructive to do with your day, because all you really have is today. That's all that you have. And obviously, I'm a big advocate for education. I believe that education, if nothing else, provides options for people. You have options. And when you get out of prison and you return to society, people will identify that you've had the commitment to see something through, that makes you a valuable asset to different organizations.
Thank you. So Richard, you were talking about how one of the key things for your success was the fact that it seems like your dad cared, and you had that support, and there was some extra support on the outside to help with maybe funding some education. So for the next 2 guests, maybe intertwine some of that and talk about, did you have that kind of support or did you not? Because what I'm wondering is what do we tell people that their families have given up on them and they just don't have that kind of support? So who wants to go next?
So that's a tough question for me because like Jason, I had a lot of support. My name is Ted Gray. I'm the executive director of the Crop organization. Little backstory, Jason Bryant and myself are co-defendants. We were both sentenced in 1999 to life in prison. I received a sentence of 40 years to life. Unlike Jason, I made some different decisions when I first entered the system. I really kind of gave myself over to how it is in prison. When they told me this is how it is, I kind of decided to, probably out of my need to survive, I thought it was more important to be a good dude in prison than a good son. And so ultimately, I made the decision to continue to make poor choices, and wasn't very productive for about the first 7 or 8 years of my incarceration. So it's funny that you bring up the family component, because it was my dad. I was still at High Desert, 10 years after I had been sentenced, and he's asking me, what are you still doing here? Why is it that you can't get out of here down to a level 2? And at the time, I would tell him things like, Dad, you don't know how it is. This is how it is in prison. I have to do what I got to do. And for the most part, I had avoided major, rule violations. It was mostly small things, relatively speaking, but it was enough to keep me there. And so ultimately, I had to make the decision, and it was with his encouragement that I decided that it was, my environment wasn't going to determine what was possible for my life. I didn't have to be a product of my environment. And so it was around that time that I planted my flag and said, this is what I'm going to do with my future. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to find ways to add value. I'm going to be productive. And if ever I do get the opportunity to earn my freedom, I want to be prepared and equipped. So I don't, for those who don't have access to a strong support system, I would say find one on the inside. They're there. You might have to look in unusual places. You might find them in education or the law library or wherever it is. But find a group of people who are willing to stand with you in your higher commitments. They're not the type of people who really love you, who are really for you, aren't going to encourage you to do things that are going to take you further away from your freedom and ultimately your family on the street. So I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Choate, but I don't really have personal experience with not having a support system. I will say this, for those of us who do have that, it wasn't the punishment of the CDCR that really motivated my personal transformation. It was the people that I had in my life who were loving on me, and their steadfast commitment to stay in it with me and support me. So I know support systems are important, and for those of us who don't have them readily available or in the traditional sense, I would say seek them out. You probably could find that in the church, and you could find it in other productive areas of the prison.
I love how you said, plant the flag of your life. Basically, you're saying that you've now drawn a line in the sand. This is, you're now planting that flag. You're going to make a change right now. Ken, so do you remember planting a flag? Was that your experience also, or?
Sure. My name is Ken Oliver. I'm the Director of Business Development for CROP. I did 24 years, had a life sentence of 50 plus to life, and was released under Prop 36 after a long process in 2019. These gentlemen, Richard and Jason and Ted, have said a whole lot more eloquently than what I can say, but what I will add is that I think that the first step is tearing down the fences of your own possibilities. During my prison experience, and most of the people that I know in the environments that we come from, both prior to prison and during prison, it's not a place that inspires hope. It's not a place that inspires possibilities without a lid. And so I would encourage everybody to think beyond those fences and tear down those internal fences that have been built up in our lives, those kind of false notions of limitation that we have. Because even if you don't have a support system, I did a lot of time where I didn't have a support system. Sometimes I did have a support system, but that didn't deter me from continuing to move forward and digging deep within myself to find possibilities outside of the parameters that other people may have thought for me. And when I was released, I was surprised to find an ecosystem of community and people who also believed in possibility and hope in a way that I never imagined. And I often tell Ted and Jason and Richard that, you know, I've been overwhelmed with the amount of good people out here in community that are willing to embrace the fact that a person is coming home from prison, both in the nonprofit sector, both in the business sector, and the community. Like, people genuinely have a place for you to succeed, and they encourage you to succeed. And they've shown me that because I've been incarcerated, that that's no limitation on my possibilities, right? And it's given me a better and stronger sense of self. And so I think sometimes in the prison environment, we tend to limit ourselves based on the environment. You know, we're surrounded by fences and gun towers and all that stuff, the bricks and the cells, et cetera. But there is a world of possibility for people if they make the decision to pursue it. And it is a conscious decision, right? Ted alluded to it earlier. We have to plant our flag and say, you know what, I'm not going to be limited by what's offered to me. I'm actually going to think outside the box. I'm going to continue to feed myself, whether that be through education, whether that be through the church, spiritually, et cetera. But if you only see the lid on the limitations, then you've already lost the battle before you've even started, because you've handcuffed yourself, right? You've handcuffed your own possibility. And, you know, we can all talk about what goes on the inside. What I want to talk about is what goes on out here. There are good paying jobs out here. There are people that will embrace you, that don't care what you did in the past, that they think that you as an individual, as a human being, can be bigger than the mistake that you made or series of mistakes that you've made. And this goes for all races. This goes for Latinos, this goes for whites, this goes for blacks, this goes for Asians, this goes for every population out here. I've seen it, and I've worked and had the privilege to work with people in the Capitol, hundreds and hundreds of formerly incarcerated men and women that have come out, given back to the community, provided a service in the way of advocacy, provided service in criminal justice reform, provided service on the weekends, getting guys stuff during COVID, mass, lunches, volunteering, doing all this type of stuff. And it's really amazing to see such a large community that has lived up to a potential that is counterintuitive to what the prison narrative may be. So that would be my piece, is to really dig deep within self first, even if you don't have a support system, you know, because your first anchor in life is yourself, right? And, you know, there's people out here that have never been to prison and have hard knocks and don't have a necessary support system in the way that we're talking about today. Yet they found that other level within themselves to dig deeper and keep going and find a way to make it. And I think possibility and hope is what every person inside prison, men or women, have the opportunity to embrace.
So you talked a little bit about the community, and this question is for anybody that wants to answer it. We have a lot of programs going on inside the prison, and we have a lot of programs going on outside the prison, and the community has a lot of programs. But I still hear about the person that gets out of prison and spends the first 2 or 3 nights on a park bench, and they're not connected. So how do we do a better job connecting people from the programs that are in the prison to the programs in the community?
I'll take that one. I think the number one thing that we all have to consider as a community, both from your position, Brant, and the officials within the prison system, the reentry community, and the community at large, is that we have to have a place to house people, because the foundation of being able to move forward in life is having a safe place to rest your head. to go to sleep securely and safely, to know that you can get up in the morning and drink a cup of coffee or tea and go on about your daily work. When you don't have that, it creates a whole series, a plethora of stressors that is very difficult to overcome. So I think that from a policy standpoint, from a community standpoint, we have to do a better job at providing both short-term solutions for housing, which are decent, but as you mentioned, they don't cover everything. But then on the back of that, long-term solutions for people to really make that necessary transition to get away from those playing the corners, so to speak, which happens if you're not stable. As we've talked about today, a lot of people don't have support systems to go home to. We were all fortunate in our own ways to have a place to rest our head. That wasn't a problem for me or Ted or Jason or Richard, but for a lot of people it is. And so I would encourage policymakers and state officials to really hone in on the fact that before you can talk about anything else, workforce development, before you can talk about getting off parole and parole credits and halftime and all this other kind of stuff, we have to get people solid, stable places to live and then allow them to position themselves over time to get into workforce, to get into sustainable living, sustainable wages, et cetera, and so forth. So that would be my piece on that.
So you mentioned
I would like to add, I don't know how long it's been since we started giving people $200 at the gate. But I think, I want to say it's 40 years or so.
50, 1973.
Okay, 50 years. And so it's been $200 for 50 years. And obviously what that $200 would do for you in 1973 isn't what it would do for you today. So in answer to your question, like, how do you get them over that couple day period to not have to be sleeping on a park bench while they're accessing these resources and community services? One of the ways that would make a lot of sense would be to kind of adjust that gate money to, with inflation. I don't know what that number would be, but probably $1,000 would I'm guessing would be closer to $1,000 than $200. And that for the people who are really getting out and trying to pursue and tap into the resources that are available, that would be a much more realistic number to help them bridge that gap for the few days, the week, whatever it takes.
So on top of the additional funding, it seems to me like those that are successful do a really good job networking and connecting before they get out. And before you go, Jason, I just want to maybe add a new layer to this, and that is that I know that the CROP organization has some pillars of principles that you go on, and I think that in maybe discussing what those are here will help answer some of these questions that I'm asking. Because if indeed people have the components of these pillars, then they would actually be better prepared. So why don't you kind of intertwine some of that? And I know that Ken brought up one of the pillars, which was housing already. So,
so between the four of us, we've got, well over 80 years of experience with incarceration. And one of the things that we've done as a team, including our fifth member, who also has over 20 years of incarceration, is we've identified 4 pillars for successful reentry. And in the first pillar, we believe that it starts with the way we think, our thinking. So personal leadership development and soft skill development. So when it comes to personal leadership development, basically what we're talking about is helping people understand that they have agency to make decisions in their lives to create the future that they say they want. Ted spoke very well about it. He was talking about how his environment does not determine his future or his choices. Like, he decides how he will relate to his environment, not the other way around. When it comes to soft skills development, we're talking about some of the basic skills that people have out here that we usually don't have access to when we're incarcerated, such as how to work on a team building skills, resilience, focus mastery, critical thinking, how to operate Gmail. So we believe that that's the first pillar for successful reentry, is that you have strong personal leadership skills and these soft skills that a lot of employers are actually looking for, because even though they're willing to hire you, they usually don't have the time to train you on things that you should know coming into a job.
Great. Richard, why don't you take one of the other ones? Or
One of the,
you're going to,
well, one of the things I wanted to mention, and I'll take one of the pillars, but one of the other ones was and it's part of the first pillar is there may be guys watching this video right now and they're putting all the responsibility on the state, right? What do they have? What do they have? And what Jason's talking about with personal responsibility is we got to be proactive. We got to say it's on us. Like you mentioned, networking. We got to go out, not 6 months before we're about to release. If they're a short-term offender, they need to start their networking with the lifers, or with the long-term, the guys who are serving a long amount of sentences, because they have the access to the transitional housing addresses that are available right now. Should there be more? Could there be more? Sure. But we're talking about what's available right now. And for the long-term guys, just waiting until the last 6 months, it's not a wise plan. So we got to be proactive and on the inside to be building those relationships, to finding places to go. And there are places, they may not be the best places, but it's somewhere. And so while this system definitely needs major transformation, we need to transform our own selves and be the leaders of our own lives. Another pillar.
Second pillar is hard skill training.
Yeah, hard skill training. Part of something different that CROP is going to do and is doing most of the time, from our experience and from my experience, the jobs that people think about when they get out are construction, truck driving, restaurants, and those are great jobs if that's what you're passionate about. But I think there's this idea on the inside that the ceiling for who we could be and what we could do and what we could make is like just right here. The most we could make is $20 an hour. The best I could be is some type of journeyman construction guy. And we just don't believe that on our team. And we want to be the first organization that is connected to the tech industry where our men and women could come out of prison and come to our program and get hard skills training in the tech industry, in business to business sales. I mean, we got so many guys, they knew sales on the negative end. Those with training, we could learn sales on the positive end. I know somebody who had a life without the possibility of parole sentence. The Sacramento Kings gave him an opportunity to sell popcorn in the stands. They saw that he was a good salesman. They hired him as in their sales department. We have the skills, we have the ability, but now we're giving people the opportunity, if they're willing, to come and learn some things that they thought may have never been possible, to live out an unprecedented future in business to business sales, and UX UI design, and like the web, like this Zoom call, the way this screen is designed, they could learn those things. So
we've talked about the leadership, soft skills as one of the pillars, training, hard skills as another pillar. We've talked about housing as another pillar. Ted, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what's the missing pillar?
Employment. So ultimately, employment or lack thereof is one of the major contributors to recidivism. So we believe in a wraparound program that begins with the first pillar, which is personal leadership, soft skills, connects them to the hard skills, moves right into connecting people in employment. So our goal is to place our program graduates in positions where they can either go directly to work for these companies or to do an internship inside these companies. And like Ken said, they're all connected, because obviously they need the soft skills and the hard skills to get the employment, but they also need the housing. So it's an integrated program with wraparound services, and that's really what is necessary for somebody to succeed. And if you're missing any one of those components, you're really at a disadvantage.
I would add, if it could, that, one of the things that I've witnessed out here, and I want to give encouragement to men and women inside, and I give encouragement to men and women out here, is about how high end the employment can be. Like Richard mentioned it earlier about that ceiling of $18 to $19, $20 an hour. Like I know people and have worked with people that are now high end salaried people at Microsoft who did years in prison. And so we know that in order for people to be fully invested many times, and in order for people to have that dignity of work, they need to get into a livable wage, which is difficult for people coming out of prison if you don't have a skill set, which is why we focus on skill set development. If you don't have the necessary skills, it's going to be difficult for you to get into a different type of income bracket. And if you can't get into a different type of income bracket, it's going to be difficult for you to sustain long-term housing. So that's why Ted mentioned all these things are intertwined. You can't really have one without the other, unless you play the corners. And obviously, we encourage everybody to move away from that. So yeah, getting people the high-end skills necessary where they can get high-end careers and not just jobs that are transitory in nature. We want people to have pride in what they do for a living, have a goal and a vision about what they want to do for a living, and be able to take home a nice paycheck and buy their own home, pay their own rent, pay their own mortgages, pay their own automobile notes, et cetera, and so forth. We think that's important for people.
Another component that's like something that has to happen simultaneously along with this is there's a major effort. Ken's been involved with it for a while. It's called employer development. And I'll let him share a little bit about what that means, but it's really about advocating for the people on the inside.
Right. And one of the things that we do, and I've been involved with it and do a lot of work with it, and we're going to do a lot of this at CROP, is actually going out and meeting with employers, right? And talking to them about the narrative or the preconceived stigma that they may have as employers about hiring what they call out here first chance or second chance talent, right? And we go in and advocate and say, look, some of the brightest and most creative minds in the country exist beyond the prison wall for whatever reason. And the fact of the matter is that 70 million people in America have a criminal conviction of some sort, which is about 1/3 of the workforce. And it behooves organizations, whether they're state organizations or basketball organizations or tech companies or whoever, to provide atmospheres for people to thrive. And usually if you give people the opportunity, and usually if you give them the type of nurturing that they need and provide them, the environment, usually you'll get the most loyal worker. You'll find you'll get the person that's there on time. And we see some of this stuff with the Prison Industry Authority, that typically the higher the pay, typically guys are rushing out first thing in the morning to try to be the first one at the gate. They're trying to be there to work overtime to make that extra money. That's a pride and dignity in work, in addition to the incentive of a good salary, right? So yeah, working on that employer development piece is very important, and that's something that we take very seriously. It's just as important as the talent development or giving guys and girls hard skill development. So that's one of the things we do. And one last thing, I don't want to go too far past the pillars because those are very important. We've also made a dedicated effort as a team to provide and create a lifelong support network, very similar to a college alumni, because we understand, as you mentioned earlier, Brant, that some people don't have a support system, and it's difficult to navigate long-term success if you don't have that support network. You see it in things like AA and NA and other different types of organizations. We think that by providing a lifetime alumni network of people that go through the program, where you always have access to upskilling, you always have access to help with job placements, you always have access to help with long-term housing, you always have a brotherhood or a sisterhood where you can go to events and bond with people who have similar and shared experiences, is very, very important. And we're committed to providing that for the men and women in California.
Well, it's been an honor speaking with you, gentlemen. I'm glad to hear that there are a lot of people that are successful, and there are more people that are successful than not, and it is possible. And I'm grateful for you for helping provide some hope for those that are still incarcerated in California prisons, and look forward to working with you in the future on bigger projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
We appreciate everybody inside too. Thank you. Continue to do hard work.
Stay focused, stay encouraged.
Thank you.